Yay! Hi guys, so my name is Klara. I am the recruitment manager in Lund, and I was previous network manager and also was part of OGX. So first I would like to talk to you about general communication skills, which are important anywhere in your school, university, at work, or at home. And I would like to mention three concepts that I came across that are rated by top-rated international speakers, and I thought they're worth mentioning. The first one is the hail concept. It doesn't mean the hail, the ice, but it means to greet enthusiastically. And it has four main components, which one should follow. First one is honesty. It is to be clear and be straight when you speak to someone to create a better bond. The second one is to be authentic or authenticity. And that's to be yourself, to stand in your own truth and to don't stay on the surface when you talk to someone, but actually make a deep conversation and to, again, create a better bond and be trustworthy when you're talking to someone or writing to someone in any way. The third one is integrity, and that is to be your word, to don't say something that you won't do, and to keep your word basically. Because then when you communicate with someone later on, you want them to trust you, right? You don't want them to doubt you, your colleagues, your teammates, anyone, or your family. And the last one would be love, and that is that not in the romantic sense, but it is in a sense that when you talk to someone or when you're writing to someone, you should wish them well, you should be kind and positive and warm when you're talking to someone, or again, writing to someone just to create a stronger bond with them. The next concept that I would like to mention is to be using a language of a leader instead of a victim. And that is in a sense that you don't try to complain, you don't point out the negatives, you don't try to just point out to problems, but you instead try to be more optimistic and positive. So you, instead of saying that you can't do something, that something doesn't work, you try to be solution oriented, and you try to come up with, instead of saying what doesn't work, saying how you can improve it, or not saying that someone doesn't like you, or this is not going on, but trying to, again, be positive and optimistic about things and not be a victim, but try to be a leader when you talk or write. And the third one would be what could help you in communication is that you should tell a story when you communicate in any way. So this is again that it emphasizes the importance of trust and confidence when you're communicating with someone. And in a way, if you're telling a story, you become more capturing, and you catch more the attention of your audience. So and that's very well used in Isaac on our online platforms, and also when we're having conferences, we always try to tell a story to capture one's attention and interest. So these are the three main that I wanted to share with you. And in the end, we're going to share links to different videos that can give you more insight on these concepts, because I think they're really useful. And again, it's in all different fields, at work, at home, or in school. Yes, and now I will move on to communication more related to ISEC, B2C, and internal communication within ISEC. So first, why would you want to improve your communication? Why would you want to become better? The first one that came to my mind was that clear and effective communication is part of being a leader. It's part of one of the leadership qualities of ISEC. So if you have a clear and good communication, you have the possibility to empower others with it, right? The next one would be to increase your effectiveness. So again, if the communication is improved, you have better effectiveness at work or internal communication in the organization. And that is that you will save time by avoiding some mistakes or misunderstandings that you have in the team by just communicating more effectively and more clearly, so that everyone understand each other, right? And the third one would be to have a better experience overall of the work. So if you have good communication, if you use the general principles that I mentioned before, you will have an overall smoother and nicer experience, and you will be more motivated to work and interact with people when it's smoother, instead of knowing that when you start communicating, it's going to lead to some issues, and instead you would want to do it on your own. So it's So again, the communication improvement will do magic in this part. So now how would you go about it, or how to communicate in the right way? So in ISAC, we have a brand tone that is mentioned in a blue book, which basically contains all the different rules and principles that ISAC follows. And we'll talk about this later on. So blue book will be explained later on in other biweekly calls, so I won't focus on that, but I will focus on our brand tone. So especially when we talk to our customers, the students or youth, we use a specific brand tone, which includes many adjectives. Or the first one is to be inclusive. So it's to be open and try to interact with people and bond with them. The second one would be to be conversational, to not be too formal, but try to be on the same level. In the end, we're students, we are youth that is running ISAC, and we're again offering our services again to youth. So it is to be conversational, and that is also when you talk to your teammates or colleagues. The third one would be to be activational. Thank you, Marlena. So that means that we learn by doing, that we are trying to approach things from a practical way, and that we're trying to take action when there are some challenges and risks. The next one would be to be relevant, to engage with topics that are currently influencing the world around us, and to be well informed. Be daring, expressing energy and passion. Be relatable, so that so then we are speaking to someone, for example, at the fairs, or even to our teammates, that we can relate to each other, that we share certain problems, that we share certain situations that we have been in before. So in that way, we can make a better connection. And lastly, to be clear, to be simple, and to be able to separate internal communication from external. That means that when you talk to someone that wants to go on ISAC experience, you shouldn't mention any acronyms. You should be clear with what you're trying to say. You shouldn't use the language that you use during meetings or with your colleagues. So those are the ways that we try to talk to our customers. And now I'll focus more on how we do it when we try to improve internal communication just within the company or within ISAC now. So how would you go about that? So first, you would have to start using your communication channels right. And that means, for example, if you're communicating through emails, what I found a good way of being more connected with your leaders would be to CCC your correspondence to your leader. So if you're talking to a customer, if you're talking to someone that wants to go on an experience with ISAC, you would CC your leader in the email. And that way, the leader would follow up the conversation, know what's going on. And then when you have a meeting, you would save so much time just by focusing on what has to be done or what's the problem, but you wouldn't have to retell the whole story. Your leader or your colleague or whoever you would CC to the mail would know what's happening. The next one would be to use workspaces online, which, for example, MC is using. So something like Slack or Notion are workspaces where you can share to-do list, your task list, flow of how a project is going. And in that way, everybody knows what everyone else is doing. So if you have questions, ideas, you can just directly interact with the person online, and you don't have to, again, do it through a meeting, which can then become very lengthy. So these are ways you can save some time by using the communication channels right and make the communication smoother. The next one would be to have a stronger bond with your colleagues. So again, it's important that you follow the general principles of communication, to be honest, authentic, having integrity and love. And this is much easier to do when you're actually friends with someone, when you're more bonded and when you can trust each other. And it just happens automatically. You don't have to try. So it's good to have a lot of social activities in your LCs or in general in any organization and create a stronger bond, to have a smoother communication. And the last one would be to always have feedback space. To always try to discuss things together and to encourage sharing in the team and to have constructive criticism and accept it. And again, learn from the mistakes and improve it. So all of these three things I've learned that can really improve your communication within the team. And now I will pass it on to Sahel, who's going to talk more about communication with businesses.
So can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Fantastic. All right. So, hey guys, so as you already know, my name's Sahel. I'm from Bangladesh. Originally, actually, I forgot to mention I'm from Iran, but anyways, I'm gonna be, so this is nice because we're gonna be talking about a lot of different cultures as well today, as you can see in the bullet points, but I'm gonna be talking to you guys about specifically on how to improve your communicational skills on a personal and more importantly on a professional level, right? So, let's look at it from this way. Communication in its essence is all about projecting confidence. It's about being tactful and having the ability to articulate your thoughts and substantives into very cohesive and well thought out rhetoric. It's crucial for someone to be, when someone's looking to be a leader who's vocal, seems authentic, as Klara mentioned. People can actually confide in them and being able to trust what they're saying, and has that sort of attention grabbing presence through his or her words. But a big part of that is not just being able to speak. It's also attention, it's also being able to have those observational skills and your ability to listen and kind of comprehend what your counterpart or in a public place your audience is saying or responding to, with their facial cues, their expressions, and so forth, which we're going to be discussing today at length, right? So firstly, let's look at when we were talking about, say, the basics and also about online communication. So we're going to go through that really quickly. So of course, we're all very nervous when it comes to like having jitters or like having stage fright whenever you're going on stage and you're not even sure how to respond to people, and that's fine. I think that's the first part, is acceptance. Understand where you're lacking so that you know how to like work on it. So the usual advice would be like going to watch talk shows or reading novels. The reason why we say that, it's not to just improve your vocabulary or something like that. It's also to increase your comprehensive flow, which allows you to like pick up on what's being said to you a lot quicker and brings fluency, right? It also essentially, as I've found from my experience, it helps you to tell a story, to paint a picture, like Klara said, like, when you're trying to convince someone, trying to relate to them. It's important when you're trying to make your pitch as relatable as possible with real life examples that they can understand. So being part of Isaac, you will need to learn how to approach tons of external stakeholders. And that's how you need to build your expertise in terms of like, customizing your content or speech as per the medium of communication you're using. So let's look at the basics for, the tips and tricks and sort of the pitfalls that you can face when it comes to online communication, right? So when we start off with online communication, it's great to, allow yourself to type out an official email when you're addressing some issues, when you're facing with a, corporate partner or some GC, as in like, the HR personnel of some organization you're trying to close or something. And sometimes it's difficult to talk face to face. So emailing them might be a lot easier, but it's like a double-edged sword. It can also come with its disadvantages. Now, if you type out because you're not being able to see them, so even if you're voicing any grievance, if you're not being tactful about it, it might come off as being offensive. So, if you're saying to someone like, oh, hey, Kevin, we didn't get the billing for the shipment delivered or something like that. It's been 2 days. How long is it going to take? Are we going to have to wait a lot longer or something? So you can tell that even if the speakers are on a first name basis, but because the person can't see you, your tone might be interpreted as being very rude. And that kind of harms your working and at times your personal relationship as well. And that's something that maybe you want to be working around. So, a better approach in those cases would, if I use an example, would be like, oh, hey, Kevin, I hope you're doing well, you're in good health. I had a query with regards to the payment of the shipment that was delivered. Could you please kindly provide me an update regarding the matter, and if there are any issues pending from our end that will help expedite or speed up the process? Feel free to let me know. Thanks, cheers, best regards, and all that. So what does that tell you? It shows that you're willing to empathize with your opposite counterpart, firstly. Secondly, it also shows that you're not being too pushy, but you're still wanting an update from him in the most, how should I say this, polite way possible, right? So we want to be doing that as much as we can, because obviously they can't see your smiling face. And especially when it comes to corporate culture, and this is something you guys will understand the more you're part of a corporation, is that if there are things about your nature that's being perceived negatively, it can be held against you for a long time, because first impressions last. So it's important that you do not harm your overall goodwill. So we'll try to stay as structured as possible. Of course, if there are urgent matters that need faster responses to, you can do so. You can get the point across without sounding rude. So before we, and as I think before we can move on to the offline or face-to-face meetings, I can tell you that as Isaacers, you're going to be expected to learn how to manage the human resources who you're reporting to, and even the ones who are going to be reporting to you as well. So it's something that you'll develop over time. So when it comes to offline communication, something that's very important that a lot of people do not do and they should be doing is background research. You should always research the issue or the business deal at hand, or the client you're trying to close, or the HR personnel you're trying to meet, because it's important to understand what they want, what they're looking for, what bad experiences have they had, what experiences haven't they had so far, right? So it's important for you to follow that protocol. And of course, especially in terms of decorum, I think that's something that goes amiss for a lot of people. And I've noticed that, like, say, as an ISAC, right? If you're representing your LC or your country, you're going to be in diplomatic situations. Maybe say you're even meeting an ambassador. So what was your natural reaction in those situations be? Like, oh, ma'am, sir, Mr., Mrs. Absolutely wrong. All right. So because when you're referring to an ambassador or diplomat, you always refer to them as Your Excellency. Or when you're referring to them in a conversation or speech, you refer to them as His or Her Excellency. So like, this is just a small example of like how you need to understand protocol and do your research, before you go and talk to someone. So same applies when you're trying to meet companies, going back to what we were talking about. And of course, it's important for you to be able to analyze what your unique value proposition is. What are they getting through ISAC's Global Exchange Program? So if you're not being able to create that pitch to be able to relate that story to them, the speech is over before it even begins. Well, not exactly. I mean, I don't want to be too dramatic about it. So what can you do in those cases, right? I mean, of course, you have the ISAC Blue Book to refer to when it comes to like understanding the values that you need to be putting forward as a brand. But what do you do when you're not so prepared? So a great way to do this is basically getting information during the meeting, right? So when you're talking to people, you try to slowly weed information out of them. Like, remember what I said, like, try to make as much conversation as possible for them to start opening up to you. And then you start slowly pitching them the template questions that you have. Again, for those, refer to the Blue Book for ISAC. Another way to get a great reaction and to build instantaneous rapport is to find any affiliations or like partnerships, that the organization has or that you have that can serve as a common bound as far as your conversation goes. So I think that's also a great way to establish faith and to gain trust with the people you're communicating with. So a very essential model, since we are talking about that, and that brings us to the point about the cultural, geographical, and social nuances, right? So when it comes to that, this is something you guys will find really interesting. So if, say, you're meeting someone from Brazil, I know Rodrigo's here. For example, you shake hands with everyone at the meeting, and the women tend to kiss each other on the cheeks. It's a bit more open sort of conversation, and at the face-to-face meetings tend to be a lot more intimate. They're very close to you when they're speaking because they want to inspire friendship and trust, right? And meetings like amongst the Italians or with Indians as well, for people from the Indian subcontinent, that's also very similar actually, if you know. And so you need to be able to understand how and where you need to be able to build on the small talk when it needs to be getting personal. In contrast to, say, in UK or Germany, where it tends to be more direct. In contrast, it tends to be very straight to the point and blunt. So you can't take that as for being rude. It's just the way they are. So the formalities are maintained with formal handshakes, and the meeting starts on time, ends on time. It doesn't go on for a while, or it doesn't start late or anything like that. So there's actually a very useful link for this to show the contrast. I'll be providing that to you guys who are interested. So then we move on to, say, the follow-ups, right? And this is very crucial because this is about first you get your foot through the door, and then it's about making sure you stay there and you position yourself in the minds of the consumers. It's time to reap what you sow, basically, is what we say in business terms. So what do you do in terms of that? So the follow-up can be in the form of emails or further meetings for coffee or whatever. It can be. It's a bit more casual then, right? So but especially if you can also keep this in mind for interviews. So a lot of you guys will be going for interviews around Europe. So a face-to-face convo, is great. Maybe not under Corona, but for like 10 to 15 minutes when you have precise questions ready, a bit of small talk about like the weather or whatever it might be, and then you start getting into like talking about what you're there to talk about. So now that we understand what the need and the fundamentals for building a healthy relationship, let's look at the bigger picture here. We're just talking about one relationship here, but then you think about building 5, 10, or even more relationships, more than that, right? So this is where we're going to be talking about mapping, network building, and management. So when it comes to these, when you're finding out those connections among those network, when you've built up the network in itself, you start building strong alliances. This is what we call mapping. And this is also applicable when you're trying to close a deal or a client, because the better you know the client, the better you know how to approach them. You would know who the decision makers are as well. So you would know how to best approach them as well, right? And this sort of structural adaptability is exactly what Isaacers are expected to develop over time, because you're expected to possess this in abundance, given the amount of meetings you're going to be having to do. And it allows you to be a more informed and thoughtful person in your professional and your personal life as well. Because we're talking about adaptability, we're talking about articulation and leadership. So you will learn firsthand how to navigate across different forms of communication with people from all over the world, whether it's within your organization or others for that matter. And this is essential when we look at the overall qualities of what makes a good leader: a confident spokesperson, someone people trust for their honesty and are comfortable working with, and who's understanding of his team, the people he leads, the people he's reporting to, and those, his company works from the outside as well, because it tells you how transparent, how honest, this goes back to the Hale concept that Klara was talking about. And of course, the ability for you to be forthcoming and to build a rapport. And that's essentially what you need to become the face of the organization. And with that, I conclude my part of the presentation. So I would like to give the floor to Marlena to take it from here.
Yes, thank you, Sahel. Thank you, guys. Do you have any questions right now to Klara or Sahel? Because we have a bit of time if you want to do it. If not, we can go to game. But if someone, just speak up and don't be shy.
Yeah, if you guys have like any sort of queries, confusions, or feel free to shoot away.
But we want to also, before we all check out, we have our checkout question, and regarding communication, what is helping you? Share your tips and tricks. What is helping you if it's going about communication? So I'm giving you the mic right now, and whoever wants to speak, let's go for it. And also, I just got a message from Lily. Please remind all the members to check membership criteria email. So also after the call, just to go to your isaac.se email and check the message from Lily. It's super, super important right now.
Got you, fam.
To come back, what are your tips and tricks if it's going about communication, how we can improve it? Who wants to start? The stage is yours, guys. It's really, even if it's like super simple, like those things on American movies that they saying to give it up with the stress, just imagine the audience in underwear or naked. Are you doing that or no? Like some small things that is helping you if it's going about communication.
I can go? Okay. So for me, I think one thing I remember, like I can say is good for communication is the way you're dressed. It's like, I don't know if it's just me, but the way I'm dressed determines how I feel. So if I'm wearing something super comfortable and like sweatpants and a t-shirt, I'm in a more relaxed mood and it's like a chill conversation. But when I want to have like formal meetings and stuff, I would like go somewhere else and get myself like dress somewhere, like wear a suit or wear like a corporate shirt just to know that okay, I'm meeting someone different. So that for me, that's just it, like wearing something that reflects the mood that I want to have when meeting someone. It's like going on a date too. You don't want to wear a suit on a date. So yeah.
That's really good feedback.
Except for Daniel. I'm pretty sure Daniel wears suits on dates.
Always. I have something. For me, usually, like when I speak to people or like do, let's say, a session or something, I think I mentioned this like once as well. I usually look into like eyes of people, but not to make them uncomfortable. I just check like if people actually paying attention. And for me, I think it's usually like for me, I can understand if a person is interested in the session or not. When I do this communication, like when I look into like someone's face or eyes, and it helps me to set the pace of the conversation or whatever that I'm delivering. I can either speed it up, cut things down, change the activities as well based on these expressions and like the communication that I have, like when I look into someone's eyes or face, usually when I'm talking.
This is actually quite interesting, Alanka, that you just shared, because in China, especially, and because that's the link that I'll be sharing with you guys, right? It's actually important for you to maintain eye contact, especially when you're talking to the eldest person in the meeting who presides over the meeting. So it's absolutely crucial that you maintain that protocol. You don't, because the moment you dart your eyes around, it's like you don't trust them or they don't trust you. So it can be like it's a fine balance you have to strike when it comes to these things.
Wow, cool. Thanks, Sahel.
Cheers, man. This is good stuff. Keep it coming, guys.
Yeah. So many good tips. Anybody else?
Wow, it must have made a serious impression.
Oh, Rossi?
I was speechless. It was so good.
Oh,
And
thank you.
but maybe I'm talking a bit from a B2C perspective because that's what I've been doing. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that besides everything that you guys said, I don't want to repeat anything. It's very important to understand that synergy is key and crucial for good communication so that we don't understand each other, and that can work for Isaac and that can work outside of Isaac because situations are not that easy, so you have to deal with different departments if you're working or with different teams in Isaac. So I think it's very important to know what is going on overall because that might influence your work and how you're doing stuff with your own members, how you're communicating. Maybe you're giving the wrong information and then it's going to be a communication issue. So these are small stuff that is important to understand, that even though you belong to a specific division like a team, you have to kind of understand the rest also, because there can be times when you have to work with them. So that's a point that I just want to share.
That's a really good point. Thank you so much. And I think that's actually crucial to something when it comes to internal communication. Can someone tell me from here, even Rosanna, you're included as well, what do we call that sort of internal network of information that carries, gossip, relevant information to the office, whatever it might be? Can anybody give me the technical term for that?
Do you know it, Sahel?
Sure.
It's actually called a grapevine. So a big part of what Rosanna just talked about is having your finger on the pulse of the grapevine, because you want to be making sure there is not misinformation or disinformation being spread around. You got to be making sure that you're having the right sort of vibes, not creating any sort of confusion or conflicts inadvertently, even forget about intentionally. So it's important to maintain, like she said, that synergy across the team, right? Because you will get information across the grapevine about what happens if someone's saying something untoward about you or someone else for that matter. And that kind of, it does in many ways hamper the harmony of the team. So that's something that maybe you guys can read up on, or even you guys will definitely for sure come across that in your own personal lives and professional lives.
Okay. Thank you, Malina. Like I remember something else, like while I was everyone was talking. Another point that I wanted to mention was like when you're communicating, your hands are also quite important. The way you place your hands. I can't exactly remember like the theory behind it, but like there's a lot of ways explaining how your hands should be positioned while they're talking to people.
Yeah.
And how open your hands are when you're having your hands closed, if it's shaking in your pockets. Like it's something that you should read up on. And your hand placement is also something crucial during communication in different scenarios. Yeah, something that I remember.
I'll just add to that with a brief snapshot. If you're crossing your arms, as in folding them, it's a defensive position. That means you're on the defensive. So make sure you don't do that when you're being questioned. People are going to think you're trying to hide something. Don't put your hands in your pocket during presentations because that seems rude. The best way to do is have you guys seen Simpsons where Mr. Barnes kind of like puts his fingers together? That's the best way. So watch the Simpsons as well, guys. That's going to help you guys a lot. So yeah, that's from me.
Yeah. Usually during sessions, I make it like a point to myself not to cross my like hands during sessions. Like if I'm listening to someone, like it's very like mentally I push myself to not to do that.
Nah, dude, that's such a good point for sure for everybody, for us to remember. Definitely. Thank you.